Hey friends, welcome back to She's At It Again. My name's Tanya, and I want to share a recipe with you today. We're going to go through it, and this is for something that when we travel, this is something I always have in my travel bag, in my carry-on. I'm never without it. And my husband makes fun of me because he always says, why do you have to take food with you everywhere we go? And then we get in the airport, we get bored and we get hungry, and he's off looking for something to eat. I just open my bag and I'm making friends left and right because I got the goods with me. This is raisin bread. This is raisin cinnamon bread, and it is made with no processed sugar. The sweetener in it is molasses, and it is fabulous. I make it in small loaves. I cut it in thin slices, but we're not traveling right now, but we have a couple of families that are about to go to Europe, and they're going to be meeting up with my daughter, but I'd like to gift them with something because they're going to take something for me to give to her, just a small treat for her. But I want to give them something to make friends with in the airport. So stick around and I'll make this as simple as I can. It's not a long process, it's super easy, and if you haven't tried yeast bread, this is a good opportunity to do that because I've never had this mess up. Unless your yeast is dead, I think you're going to nail it. So stick around, check it out. We have about 1 1/8 of a cup of warm water. Now this is just, I would say, just a nice warm bath water feeling. So don't get it too hot. If it's above 120 degrees, if you have a thermometer, that's a big no-no. So don't use it above 120, but anything just warm below that would be fine. To that, I'm gonna add a couple of tablespoons, I've got my tablespoons marked, of unsalted butter. And we're gonna use 2 tablespoons of unsulfured blackstrap molasses. I could drink this stuff. My husband thinks this is so disgusting, but I love it. I'm hoping you can get a good look at that. Unsulfured is the key to it. Unsulfured just means it's really in pure form. Blackstrap molasses is nothing more than the extract of sugar cane. It's a byproduct of making sugar, just table sugar. So not to be confused with sorghum, because sorghum is not molasses. They are 2 different things. Molasses comes from sugar cane, and sorghum comes from the sorghum plant, or as what we know it in Arkansas as milo. If you've seen a field of milo, that's pretty much what you're looking at. Okay, I'm just eyeballing this, and if I get too much, I'm really not going to be that mad. But if you get too much, it is going to affect the way that your bread rises. So about 2 tablespoons. If you're a new baker, go ahead and measure it out. And I'm just going to take this is my dough hook for my mixer, so I'm just going to use it to stir. And I'll use 1.5 teaspoons of dry yeast. So there's a teaspoon. Just going to sprinkle it over the top. That warm water is going to melt that butter, but it's also going to help this yeast to wake up and get active. So we're going to leave that there for just a bit. When it starts getting foamy, we will add our flour and our other ingredients. And this doesn't take a lot of ingredients. We're looking at the only things left we have to add are pretty much flour and salt to this. So if you want to add a little bit of cinnamon to your dough, then that's fine. And sometimes I do. Just adds a little bit of color to it. But we're going to add the cinnamon and the raisins to the inside of the bread once we roll it out and make it in that swirl design when you cut it. So we're going to let this sit for a few minutes and we'll be right back. As you can see, our mixture's getting a little foamy in there. You can tell around the edge it's active. I just want to make sure, I've used it in the last day, so I'm pretty sure it's not dead right now. But every single time, no matter what, I always just make sure that it's active by the fact that it's foaming up around the edge. So I'm going to put my dough hook back on here. And I don't have my apron on because I'm not going to be rolling anything out. But once I roll it out, I'll have that apron back on. All right, we're going to be adding some flour to this. not sure why I put that down, because I know I'm going to need it to put that flour in there. There's one. There's two. There's a little over 3. If it looks like it's too wet, I can always add more, but I can't add less. Just need 1 teaspoon of salt. I always put that on top of the flour. I don't want to put it next to the yeast. Some people say, oh, it kills the yeast. Other people say they mix it right in there with the yeast. So I'm not going to argue about it. I'm just going to put it on top of the flour and move on. Now we'll turn our mixer on and we're going to let this just mix up enough to where it gets moistened all the way through. And that's only going to take just 3 or 4 minutes. Then we're going to let it sit and rest a while, and then we'll turn the mixer back on. We're going to mix it for about 40 minutes at about speed number 2 on my mixer, but to you that would just be a good kneading. So you don't want it flying out of the bowl. It doesn't require it to slam it up against the edge of the bowl or anything like that. You're just trying to get it stirred well and get that gluten activated in it. So here we go. Well, but I'll plug it in first. That always helps. Electricity is a great thing. So this is what my number 2 speed looks like. I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of cinnamon to this. Just maybe 3/4 of a teaspoon. Because after all, it is raisin cinnamon bread. Okay, now we're just going to let this sit for about 5 minutes. I'm going to turn the camera off right now, and when we come back, we'll turn the mixer back on, but I'm not going to video the whole thing of it mixing. Just giving you times on this. So we're going to let this rest for about 5 minutes now. All right, so what we've done is just let this relax for about 5 minutes, and literally that's all it's done. It's just sat there, nothing more. So you're just going to let it relax. The dough's doing all the work at this point. It's just absorbing the moisture from the grains, and the moisture is getting into the grains, so it's a lot more relaxed. And now what we're going to do is turn the mixer back on, just regular speed again, nothing too fast, nothing super slow, but turn it back on, and we're going to let it go for 40 minutes. Now during that time, your mixer, if it's like mine, it may have a tendency to kind of vibrate and creep toward the edge of the counter. Don't let it go off on the floor, but keep an eye on it. But your mixer's going to be doing all the work. So again, about 40 minutes, set your timer, and we'll be back when it's done. Okay, I was not in here to listen to that. I went outside nearly the whole time. All right, what we're going to do at this point, this has been going for 40 minutes again. Take your mixer, unplug it, take the beater off because you're not going to need it again. That's all you needed it for, was just that first mixing. Try to get as much of the dough off as you can. And this is kind of a sticky dough. It doesn't necessarily stick to my hands as far as I can't get my hands off of it, but it's just a tiny bit drier than being able to stick to your hands. So if that makes sense to you, I always say dough should feel like soft baby skin, very, very soft baby skin, but this is more like just a little bit wetter than that. Okay, get as much from around the edge as you can to get in that solid ball of dough in the center. And a lot of people will tell you at this point, take it out, oil your bowl, and toss it around. No, you don't need any of that. Just let it, we're going to let it rise in this bowl. So what we're going to do is get our handy dandy hotel shower cap, and I have lots and lots and lots of those at my disposal. So we're going to put that on there. Let me get one out of the pantry. So we're going to cover this. If you have a warm place to put this in, if it's a cold day, by all means put it in a warm spot. If it's just an average warm day or a hot day, then you can leave it out on your countertop. We're going to leave it covered. This is probably going to almost double in size within the hour. So what we're going to do is we're going to set our timer for an hour and just let this go. When we come back after an hour, we're going to roll it out. We're going to make 2 small loaves out of this. Now you can make one in a regular size loaf pan. I would encourage you not to use a dark metal pan. I would show you what one of those look like, but I don't own one because I don't like them. They burn things on the outside and they leave it raw on the inside. So you want a shiny loaf pan or a tempered glass loaf pan, something like that. You can use an aluminum pan because here's what we're going to use. Let me make sure I get a shot of this. We're going to use this little loaf pan, but this is one of those easy foil, just baby loaf pans, I guess it's called. But I have a piece of parchment that I've cut to the bottom of it right here. This rectangle right here is the exact size of the dimensions of this pan right here. But on the sides, I've made cuts so that I can place this inside the pan. It doesn't matter if the ends go inside or outside. And I'm going to put my loaf right here. Now when it's done rising, we'll bake it, of course, and then I can just take and lift it out just like that. The parchment peels right off. You can tell I've used this several times. So anyway, that's what we're looking at. So if you don't have a glass pan or something like that, just get a disposable aluminum pan, line it in parchment, and it'll be a lot easier to handle. So we're going to make 2 little loaves. After a while, again, we're going to set our timer for an hour, and we'll be back. So we've allowed our dough to rise for 1 hour. Been right at 1 hour. So I want to take this off and show it to you. And that's about double what it was. It's a pretty small blob in the bottom. So I'm going to take my rings off. Sometimes it sticks into the raised part of my rings, and that's not fun getting it out. So take that off. I just got my hands washed. So we're good to go. And really all that's going inside this is cinnamon and raisins. The absence of sugar is not a problem, to say the least. This bread is so good. And it lasts for a long time. The only thing that I can figure out is it's the molasses that acts as a natural preservative because it lasts a long time. This does not mold, does not go bad quickly at all. It doesn't normally last a long time. And like I said, when we travel, I always have this with me. A few years ago, we went to St. Martin and I had my 2 little loaves all sliced up in my carry-on, and we got in an airport and talking to friends in there. We went with a group of people with my husband's company, and I pulled my slice out and they're kind of eyeballing me like, where did she get that? And so, of course, I'm offering it to them, and at first they say, no, I don't want anything. I'm not hungry. And when you have to fly out at 6 o'clock in the morning, you tend to get hungry early. So I'm over there snacking on my raisin bread. Finally, I talked them into getting a piece of it, and they decided that was a good idea. So we enjoyed that, but got to St. Martin, and I'd be out on the beach and get to looking around. My husband was gone. I'm thinking, where did he go? He's back in the room eating the raisin bread. So apparently it wasn't as bad of an idea as he had claimed it to be at first, because he enjoyed a lot of it. All right, we're going to divide this in half because remember, we're making 2 little loaves instead of 1 big loaf. So this is just my plastic bench scraper. Best 75 cents I spent going shopping at the kitchen store. It was worth every penny. I'm just going to get out my little rolling pin. This is really easy to roll out because it's a very soft dough. So here's how we do it. And I'm hoping, let me check and make sure I'm getting this in view. Let's see, I'm going to turn that around. Sorry, I just have to adjust it as I go because I can't tell what the screen is seeing. All right. It's usually got some air bubbles in it and just roll those out. They do a lot of squeaking. And what you're going to try to do doesn't necessarily matter what length you roll it out, but the width of it, you want it to be about the size of your pan. So there's the length of my pan, or the width of my pan. You want it to be about that size. Normally I would say it does not matter what order you put your raisins and your cinnamon on, but actually it does. And here's why. If I put cinnamon down on this, it gives it that dry surface, and when I put my raisins on, they just start moving around. They don't stick, and I can't control them. But if I put it on there, put the raisins on there first, I press them down into the dough and they stay. So when I roll it up, they don't start moving around and falling off and crawling out the end and sneaking away and escaping. So the order is you put the raisins on there first. And if you've not guessed already, I've learned that the hard way. Or I should say through experience, not necessarily the hard way, but I've learned through experience that it works better if you put the raisins on there first. I have a cup of raisins measured out, so I'm using about half on each of the loaves. And make sure you get it all the way to the ends and not just in the center of it, because people tend not to want the end pieces of the bread, but if you put as many raisins in the end as you do in the center, it's worth getting the end pieces. This is really good left over when it starts getting to where it's, you know, maybe several days old and not as fresh, or you're getting bored with it and you want something new. Just take and toast slices of it and put apple butter on there. Oh, it's so good. Okay, so I'm just mashing these down into the dough so they won't keep moving around. And I'm going to take my cinnamon. And really and truly, this just depends on how much you like cinnamon. I like a lot of cinnamon on it, or I call it a lot of cinnamon, but I just want to get that surface covered real well. So I'm going to put roughly 2 teaspoons on each loaf. It seems like if I tap it with my fingers like that, I have a little more control over where it goes than if I just scatter it. And remember, get as much on the edges as you do in the center of it. Okay, so I'm going to loosen it up with my bench scraper. I've got cinnamon all around the edge of it, so that'll just push it back into the dough. Oops, we got an escaping raisin there. All right, start rolling it up. You don't want to roll it too awfully tight. You're going to give it enough slack to where it can still rise and not have to fight through all those layers. So just loosely roll it up, scraping it with your bench scraper in the back as you go. Oh, get back in there, Raisin. Now you can put flour down on your countertop if you want to make sure it doesn't stick at all, but I find that I don't need the extra flour on there. It just makes it a little more dry, and I don't like a dry bread. Make sure you go all the way past the end and just seal it as you pick it up. Get back in there. Pick it up with your bench scraper. I saw one escape there. We'll poke it back in. All right, make sure the seam is not on the top of your loaf, just somewhere at the bottom where you can't see it. We'll put these sides of the parchment in there, and then we'll do our second loaf. Now if you want to put cinnamon down on the countertop and use it like flour to keep it from sticking, that would be fine. You just have cinnamon on both sides. That's not going to adversely affect it at all. So you're welcome to do that. So we're going to do this the same way we did the first one. Raisins first. Sometimes I get a stem in there. Ugh, I don't like the stems. Got to watch for those. I have to be careful too because I have 2 dogs and raisins are very toxic to dogs. So it's almost like if something falls on the floor, then they rush right over to it to see what it is, see if they can eat it. But they somehow know that I'm going to yell at them if they start going toward a raisin. Don't eat that. If it's a raisin or an onion or something that would make them super sick. Or a chocolate chip. Ugh. Okay, I'm going to go over this with the roller and just press these down. This reminds me of, the look of that just by itself reminds me of, I don't even know if they still make them anymore, those Little Debbie raisin cream pies. I remember eating those when I was in elementary school. I'd take them in my lunch. Those were good. And my husband will likely walk in and go, ooh, raisin bread. I love raisin bread. It's not for us. It's for somebody else. But he's kind of used to that too, sadly enough. He used to walk in and instead of saying, ooh, pie, he'd say, is that ours? Okay, I think that's enough cinnamon on there. Once we get these rolled up and put in the pans, we're going to cover them just with a loose, clean kitchen towel. We're going to let them rise in a warm place. Now, I'll probably take these out into the sunroom, even at room temperature in my kitchen, which is at about 70, 72 right now, because the air conditioner's going. They would still rise fine, but they'll rise a lot quicker in the sunroom because it's probably close to 78 or 80 out there right now. But again, just put a loose towel on it. And you can even take this parchment out if you need to do it like that. Lay your bread right on it. Fold the parchment edges back up. Drop it in the pan. Just like that. So hopefully that's picking up a view of that. All right, put these over here. I have these on a pan, a baking pan, a stainless steel pan that fits right into my small toaster oven. It's not really a toaster oven, it's a little convection oven. I have it in the sunroom, so I'm going to bake these out there to keep from turning my kitchen oven on. Cover these up with a towel. And we'll put these out in the sunroom. We are going to let these rise for about an hour. They will look really, really full and puffy. And at that point, you'll turn your oven on 350. And we're going to bake those off after they rise for an hour. So we'll be back. Okay, so here's our bread. It's risen. Ooh, I don't want to drop it. I'm trying to hold this with one hand and video with the other. Okay, I just took something out of this oven, so I'm just gonna slide this in there now that it's at the correct temperature and it's set on convection. So I have it set for about 30 minutes and it is at 350. And so we'll look at it when it comes out. Okay, so right at 30 minutes was what it took for both of these loaves to cook. Now what we want to do is take them off this pan. If I leave these in the pan as it is, they would be fine. They're not going to cook anymore, but it starts condensating, getting sweat in the bottom of it, and it winds up rendering your loaf a little sweaty and wet on the bottom. So that's why I designed this parchment like this. Whew, that's hot. Plus you can lift it out like that. Just pull the edges down or the ends off, or the edges down or the ends down, whichever one is on the outside. And then lift it off and we'll let it cool. The higher your cooling rack is off the countertop, the better it is too, because if it's real low to the countertop, it's going to have that sweat on the countertop and it's still going to leave it a little moist down there. So good airflow underneath it is essential. And these will cool off. I'll slice them probably 1/2 inch thick, package them up, put them in airtight bags, and deliver them to our friends who are fixing to leave for Europe next week. So thank you for watching, and we look forward to sharing something with you again soon. Thanks.